Good morning. Good morning. I don't know about you, but this is my favorite time of year. This is when the inner child comes out. So I am excited to be here more than anything else. I am excited about you being here in the room with us. We've got our nonprofits, our partners. We cannot do this job without you. We've got the Economic Council, we've got our Business Development Board, so we've got the private sector in here as well. And so we want to continue in Palm Beach County working as a family. Partnership is key. And so again, thank you for being here today. I look forward to the outcomes of what we're gonna sit down, talk about, strategize, so that we can help the least of us, which then helps all of us. Welcome to our 2024 Securing Our Future Economic Mobility Summit. On behalf of the board, which I have Commissioner Weiss. Commissioner Weiss, would you please stand? Representing the board. And we also have District 3 being represented by Vivian here. Why don't you stand up, Vivian? Are there any more elected officials in the room? Well, we'll report back out to any elected officials? Okay, well, we'll report back out to them because we're gonna need all the help that we can get to continue to move us forward here in our county. I would like to thank all of our sponsors for making this event possible. I'm reading this because I'm going to forget someone, and that's not kosher. So we would like to thank our community impact sponsor, Palm Beach Venture Philanthropy, and our opening reception sponsor, PNC Bank. Are you here? Let's give them a round of applause. We would also like to thank our Ally engagement and family sponsors for their support, and of course our workforce and supporting sponsors as well. And thank you to the Citizens Advisory Committee on Health and Human Services, chaired by Dr. Barbara Gerlach, and the Birth to 22 Alliance, co-chaired by Dr. Lisa Williams-Taylor and Tammy Fields. Representing for Lisa Kramer and the Youth Services Department for their continued work to ensure we have a health and human services safety net for our most vulnerable residents. Would all of the members of the CAC and the Birth to 22 Steering Committee please stand and be recognized? Thank you, United Way. I didn't see you down there. Special thanks to our Community Services Department. A big special thanks to our Community Services Department. Our community partners of South Florida and all of the members of the Planning Committee for their efforts in planning this event. Special shout out to Jamie Bradshaw of Community Partners, Sonia Holbrook, and Dr. James Green for their efforts leading up to this point. And to all of you for supporting partners, including but not limited to the Youth Services Department, Department of Housing and Economic Development, the Palm Beach County School District, Children's Services Council, United Way, and Career Source Palm Beach County. We are so grateful for your contributions to this summit, and we appreciate all of your support. Finally, I would like to thank all of our speakers and volunteers for this event. This summit would not be possible without you. Thank you for all you have done and continue to do to make this event a success and to make our community a success. We are committed to creating conditions that enhance opportunities for our residents to earn higher wages, work towards the American dream. That's why we are here today. We have a wonderful lineup of local, state, and national thought leaders here to bring you valuable information that will benefit all of us. I do want to give my Board of County Commissioners a shout out because 3 of their 7 strategic goals go directly for this cause, and that is the unsheltered, housing, as well as economic development. So please give my commissioners, yes, I'm actually praising them for that, because without their support, we would not be able to partner with you. So again, I'd like to thank you, and at this time, I'd like to invite up Superintendent Mike Burke to the stage for comments.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. You know, I thought first I would just clarify, when we talk about economic mobility, we're talking about economic upward mobility, right? Not downward. I had experienced that at one point in my life. I was a senior in college and I had to sell all my textbooks back so I could make it home for Thanksgiving. I don't know if anybody's found themselves in that situation. But fortunately for me, I'm an excellent note taker, so it worked out all right. On behalf of the school district, I just want to thank you for being here. You know, our school district serves nearly 200,000 students, if you look at from pre-K all the way to adult and community school. And our team of nearly 23,000 employees works really hard to prepare those students. So ideally, we start in kindergarten, and we work with our students for 13 years until they reach graduation as a high school senior. I have the pleasure of shaking their hand when they cross the stage, and last year we graduated about 12,500 graduates. And as I'm shaking their hands, I'm always kind of thinking, you know, okay, where are these graduates headed? You know, what's next for them? And you can see a lot of promise and bright faces, and there's a lot of great things happening, but I know we're not reaching everybody. And if you look as a nation, 60% of our high school graduates go on to a college. And that leaves about 40% that are doing something else, right? So there's about 8 to 10% that go into the armed services, and that leaves nearly 30% that are going straight into the workforce. And our goal is to equip them with skills that they go into more than just a minimum wage job, right? That they're on a path to a sustainable career where they can hopefully have their own family and even live in Palm Beach County the rest of their lives, if that's their choice. So we have a lot of work to do. We're proud of, we have over 330 choice and career technical education programs. I think that's unique to Palm Beach County, and that has served a lot of our students very well. We have students graduate with industry certifications where they can go into work in cybersecurity or medical sciences or aerospace, and we continue to add to those programs. And that's where I welcome the collaboration from this group. Our Education Foundation is paying right now for a consultant to review our program offerings to see if we're still hitting the mark and to see if there's opportunities to do better and to redirect resources where we know we'll give kids the education that they need to go on and be productive citizens. So I'm just honored to be a part of this summit here today. Thanks for having me, Dr. Green. And I'll keep my remarks short because they're going to give me a microphone again later this afternoon, and then I'll really start rambling. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, we're excited, very excited about what's coming today. Lots of great information that we know will help you to better understand exactly how we're working together to increase upward economic mobility in Palm Beach County. Now, Jonathan, last time we were together, there was something beautiful that had just happened to you. All right?
My first grand girl.
Yeah. And I remember the context of talking about this beautiful granddaughter that was being born because, you know, every child that's being born oftentimes don't have the same opportunities based on where they live. And we're going to be talking a little bit about place this afternoon during the plenary session. And if you walked into the foyer, you saw some data boards, and those data boards showed you something from Opportunity Insights. It showed you place. It showed you certain locations throughout this county where upward mobility is scarce, and then it showed you where it's green, where upward mobility is very prevalent. And so part of what we're trying to do today is to make sure that all of the locations throughout Palm Beach County are deep green, and we're going to dive deeper into that this morning. And so we believe that Autumn's zip code that it should not limit her opportunity to achieve the American dream. And most of us define the American dream as your kids earning more income and being better well off than the parents. And I think that's what we're all striving for. And as I mentioned, in certain parts of our county, specifically if you point out the North Tamron area, Ross Chetty did a study, and what it showed was kids who were born 35 years ago and grew up in that area, 35 years later, they're earning an average of about $16,000 a year. But you take those same low-income households, and if they were born in the Wellington area, then the average income is about $60,000 a year. And so we know all of the odds can be stacked against our kids if they live in a zip code where jobs are scarce, where the quality of schools and early childhood education centers are lacking, where their grocery stores are miles away, and we cannot just expect them to navigate these challenges in order to achieve their American dream. That is expecting them to beat the odds in most cases, and we're not just in the business of telling our kids that they have to beat the odds. We're in the business of changing the odds for our families and our community. And we have the ability to build systems and create environments where opportunities can flourish. And this is not just our responsibility, it is our calling. We want the same for our neighborhoods and our children, the same opportunities to learn, to grow, and to succeed.
Yeah, and when I think about my granddaughter, it's interesting because what we want to do is create opportunities where they can thrive outside of living with their parents and grandparents. What opportunities are going to be available for them as they get older and as they become those productive citizens that we're looking for and residents we're looking for here in the county. So we're thankful that all of the partners are here, the education system are here, Business Development Board, Economic Council. We're thankful all of you are here because that's going to be important. And then when we look at our neighborhoods and when our neighborhoods thrive, they contribute, and when our neighbors thrive, they contribute to productive neighborhoods. And then when those neighborhoods become productive, it contributes to growth in our county, growth in our cities, growth throughout our area. And so we're looking at such things as not only their mental, but also their physical well-being and the opportunities that they have there. Because as we know, if you are in a good physical space, then you're in a good place mentally to be productive here in the county. If you're in a good mental space, you have an opportunity to become productive here in the county. And so we look at the quality of their work then being improving. And as the quality of their work improves, now our employers are improved. Now our employers are seeing more productive employees. And as you see that opportunity continue to grow, now it helps organizations throughout the county like the Business Development Board and others. It makes their job of recruiting businesses and helping businesses expand here, it makes their job easier. Why? Because they know we have productive individuals. And then we have the opportunity to help build their skill set. So that way the type of companies that are here and that are expanding, we have individuals with the right skill set to take advantage of those opportunities. So we're excited about today. We're excited about what today is going to bring, but today isn't the end. Today is part of the beginning.
Absolutely. And what we're describing here is a vision. It's the picture on the puzzle box, if you will, where we share this common vision, this common purpose, and we can work efficiently to make sure that we're putting the pieces of the puzzle together. The infrastructure that we need to work collaboratively together is actually outlined in the Health and Human Services element, which is a part of the county's comp plan. And this integrates comprehensive plans from various domains in housing, employment, food security, health, wellness, education, safety and justice, and child care. This element lays the groundwork for how we can operationalize a system that truly changes the odds for families who have been left behind. It brings together coalitions like the Birth to 22 Alliance, which is now integrated into the Citizens Advisory Committee on Health and Human Services. And we work to advance all of these policies and priorities on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, on behalf of our municipalities and elected officials there, our mayors, the elected delegation of the school board as well. So today, we'll hear more about Securing Our Future initiative, which aims to create environments, an opportunity ecosystem, if you will, that facilitates upward economic mobility for our families who are living in poverty. We will see how our shared vision and our common purpose of maximizing opportunity for our residents can be operationalized through the Urban Institute's Upward Mobility Framework. And we'll learn about tools that we can use to align our efforts effectively. You'll hear from national experts and local leaders, gatekeepers of our systems and institutions, who will share how they are using this framework, particularly for low-income families with school-age kids. We'll also lift up initiatives like the North End Rise and showcase how evidence-based models like the purpose-built community can be implemented to maximize upward mobility. And perhaps the most important thing is by the end of today's gathering, you'll be better able to understand the unique puzzle that you hold in the services that you provide. We hope that you'll better understand how our system is working together and how you can engage with us in our efforts to maximize economic opportunity for our residents. So together, we can build a system where all of our children can thrive and live the American dream.
And so, as Ms. Baker had stated, the right people are here in the room. We've heard about the problems, we've heard about the challenges, but today we want to start to address provide solutions that are going to address those issues, address those challenges. So we invite you to engage fully today in conversations in this room and in other breakout sessions. Let's build capacity together, let's grow together, and let's thrive together. Thank you very much.
All right, and so now I am extremely excited to invite our next presenter to the stage. We are, and when I say we, I'm talking about the Community Services Department, the Department of Housing and Economic Development, Community Partners of South Florida, the school district, United Way, Quantum Foundation, Children's Services Council. We have been participating in a mobility action learning network. So we were one of, I think, 27 communities chosen across the country to identify a problem with upward mobility and to figure out how we can work together to build coalitions to address those problems. And that is facilitated by the Urban Institute. And so it has been extremely, extremely helpful for us to come together and figure out how we can tackle things like the fiscal benefits cliff and really work to dismantle some of those structures that disincentivize economic mobility. And the Urban Institute, their framework is just phenomenal. And so we decided that we would bring them here today to lift up that framework so that you can see what that picture looks like. You can see what elements are involved in maximizing upward mobility opportunities for our residents. And Keith Fudge is representing the Urban Institute and will be here to lift up that framework momentarily. Let's welcome Keith to the stage.
Do you have the clicker? I have like 40 slides. I don't want you to have to do the next slide, please, every time. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited for this opportunity to talk about upward mobility with you and share some tools that you can use to improve community conditions. Fantastic, thank you. I'm also really happy to be joined by the folks who will be on stage with me in a bit. Jennifer, who I've been fortunate to partner with for a few years now and to get to meet and learn from Fab. My name is Keith Fudge. I direct the Upward Mobility Initiative at the Urban Institute. Urban is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization that builds data and evidence to support change makers around the country. So I'm going to take a few minutes today to tell you about the history and the work of the Upward Mobility Initiative, which provides local leaders with data and tools for assessing and creating the change necessary for residents to achieve upward economic and social mobility and to tackle the systemic barriers that sustain inequities in our communities. And to tell that story, it's important to start with why we do this work, which goes back to something called the U.S. Partnership on Mobility from Poverty, which ran from 2016 to 2018. The partnership was a group of cross-sector leaders convened by Urban with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it asked the question, what would it take to dramatically increase mobility from poverty? And this was a critical question because in recent decades, rates of economic mobility in the U.S. have stagnated, casting doubt on the American dream that people can do better than their parents and achieve economic security and success. While nearly 90% of children born in the 40s did better than their parents in adulthood, in the 80s that had dropped to 50%, or a coin toss. I borrowed this slide from our colleagues at Opportunity Insights. Dr. Green mentioned their work, and Jennifer will tell you more about them a little later. It's drawn from seminal research by Dr. Raj Chetty and his colleagues, and you can see there that overall stark decline in upward mobility. But their research also showed that access to economic opportunity varies hugely by place, by race, and by other characteristics. And racial prejudice, discrimination, and segregation have made especially high barriers to achieving and sustaining upward mobility for people of color. So for example, research from Opportunity Insights shows that a black boy who grows up in a household in the top 20% of incomes is more likely to become poor, to drop all the way to the bottom quintile, than to stay in that top 20%, whereas a white boy born in that top bracket is likely to remain there. So the partnership took a holistic and systems-based approach, which is key. Mobility from poverty is too often talked about just as a matter of individual ability and hard work, but people experiencing poverty face a whole web of barriers that make it hard to rise up and escape. And maybe its most important contribution was how the partnership redefined mobility itself, arguing that economic success alone is not enough. They said that real mobility has three interconnected components. Economic success, when people have adequate income and assets to support their and their family's material well-being, but also power and autonomy, or when people have control over their lives, can make choices, and can influence larger policies and actions that affect their future. And dignity and belonging, or when people feel the sense of being valued and respected for their contributions to their work, family, and community. And this broader conception of mobility is what has driven our work since. So after that partnership concluded in 2018, our project was created with a goal of supporting communities by creating the conditions that increase upward mobility from poverty and narrow racial and ethnic inequities for children, youth, and adults. And we started with a focus on metrics. We recognize that it can take decades to measure intergenerational mobility, but local leaders need actionable information to help guide their decision-making in the shorter term. So we set a charge of developing a comprehensive but concise set of metrics that could support community change makers across sectors. In 2019, we partnered with a cross-disciplinary working group who systematically reviewed factors that research shows affect long-term mobility from poverty and which could be influenced by state and local policies. And given that comprehensive way we define mobility, that was a big task. We started with something like 170 possible factors and used an iterative approach where urban staff working with those leaders narrowed these factors. We conducted a lot of literature reviews to see what had the strongest evidence of impacting long-term economic success, belonging, and power. And eventually, the working group reached a consensus on a framework for metrics, a set of predictors that are supported by strong evidence and that cover a wide range of policy domains. And it was refined over multiple years in partnership and testing with 8 counties. This upward mobility cohort received TA and funding to use the metrics, but as part of a wider process that included cross-sector coalition building, deep and meaningful community engagement, the addition of local data and other sources of knowledge to provide a more nuanced understanding of the conditions in a community, and a systems change focus that engaged with the root causes of inequities. And after a huge amount of work, the group developed mobility action plans, which outlined a series of strategic actions they committed to target and improve community-level supports for mobility from poverty and racial equity. This process looked different for every community, so did the actions they selected, of course. I'll take a moment to talk about one, Boone County, Missouri. To develop their action plan, they used the results-based accountability framework to help set goals for their work. Then they conducted data walks or data interactives, which share county-level mobility data with residents and ask for their priorities for action very early on in the process. They also did a root cause analysis to learn more about underlying systemic causes and took many other steps. And their action plan ended up identifying 3 main domains, which were then guided by community member facilitators. So they ended up focusing on improving wraparound services for young children, increasing second chance leasing opportunities, and implementing upwardly mobile business practices. And also a real focus on early grade literacy, fair and inclusive housing, and jobs and workforce development. And they've been making fantastic progress since they left our cohort. Among their early wins, they were awarded a grant from the Cradle to Career Alliance to facilitate the expansion of programs in that action plan. They got funding from both the City of Columbia and the county to conduct the first ever county-wide housing study, and they've issued 2 annual public updates, keeping community members looped in on their progress. And they've received a lot of local media attention, which has really helped to catalyze interest from stakeholders across the county. So we took lessons from that work, from partnerships with other mobility-focused organizations to refine our framework, which I'm excited to share with you here. It begins with that 3-part definition of upward mobility that goes back to the US partnership. And from there, we emphasize the centrality of racial equity as a thread that cuts across the framework. As I mentioned, many of the barriers that block people's economic success, their power and dignity, result from long-standing and ongoing racism and inequities built into policies, processes, institutions, and culture. So supporting upward mobility really requires confronting and addressing those inequities, both in the process and the outcomes. Next, we have what we call the pillars. People can't surmount these systemic barriers on their own. Communities must ensure that residents can access the supports that all people need to achieve economic success. And the Upward Mobility Framework identifies 5 pillars that support and are interconnected and essential to mobility. Rewarding work that pays a living wage, provides dignified work conditions, and offers economic security. High-quality education from preschool through post-secondary. Opportunity-rich and inclusive neighborhoods that support family stability and well-being, their access to social and economic opportunities, and their children's chances to thrive, healthy environments and access to good health care, and responsive and just governance that engages residents in decision-making and serves the needs of all community members with restraint and fairness. And then finally, we have the predictors. For local leaders to improve conditions, they need to know what to change and how. And so these are 24 factors strongly associated with long-term upward mobility. Examples across those pillars include living wages, digital access, social capital, environmental quality, political participation. I'm going to dive into a few of these more. And local leaders can measure the status of each predictor and progress towards improving it with our suite of mobility metrics. Each metric offers one way to start assessing and monitoring a predictor over the short and medium term. So for example, this is the rewarding work pillar. There's 5 predictors. So to measure the share of employment opportunities, we use the metric, the share of adults ages 25 to 54 who are employed. For financial security, we use the metric, the share of adult with debt and collections. And no measure is perfect. There's always better, deeper, more local information. But these were selected to balance a range of factors: their validity, their availability, their consistency, the ability to disaggregate them, the degree to which they measure structural community conditions, and more. And that brings us to our upward mobility data dashboard. To support local leaders, we compiled the data for each of these predictors for every county in the country and for cities with more than 75,000 people. For smaller places, many of the sources that underlie that data aren't as consistently available. And after 2 years of development, including a human-centered design process that engaged different types of community members and leaders, this new dashboard makes the data widely available in a much more accessible way. We believe it can be useful to many types of users, including, of course, policymakers and community leaders like yourselves in local governments and CBOs and others, but also advocacy groups, community foundations, businesses, and others. As you'll see when I briefly overview the dashboard, there are many ways to use it, and we're learning more and more from local leaders about how they're applying it. It can be used to understand local conditions by examining and disaggregating key data, to contextualize that data by comparing to other communities and to national benchmarks, to prioritize where your efforts can have the greatest impact by looking at areas of strength and of challenge, and to monitor condition over time. And again, I want to emphasize there will always be more local data and community engagement, other forms of knowledge that can provide more context than high-level sources like this, but we think it can be a strong starting point and signaling mechanism to look at areas to explore more deeply. So I'm going to quickly preview the dashboard. Sometimes I do this with like a live demo, but at a big event like this, you don't need to watch me like clicking around and hoping the Wi-Fi loads fast. So forgive me in advance if some of these slides the graphics don't lend themselves quite as well as others. There are two main ways to access the data. You can search for specific communities using the search bar and see all of their metrics, or you can view a specific mobility metric across the country using the Explore tool. So let's look at a predictor that we know is important across the country. I know matters a lot here, jobs paying a living wage. This metric is the ratio of pay on the average job to the local cost of living. And you can see the value for the metric varies really tremendously across the country, and that in most places it falls well short of 1, which is what it would be the value where the average job meets the cost of living. So you can zoom in to the Palm Beach County and see that in 2022, the average job paid 75 cents for every dollar needed for a single parent family of 3 to afford the local cost of living. But if you want to get a sense of how that compares nationally, you can switch to the chart view, which shows every county kind of ranked. And in that case, Palm Beach is actually a good bit above the national median, which is that black dotted line, 68 cents on the dollar. But to really understand what that means, you'd want to dig deeper, and to do that, you can search for Palm Beach County across our mobility metrics, which produce data cards that can be disaggregated and show changes over time. So in this case, you see multiple years and how that value has changed, 4 years dating back to 2014. And you can disaggregate. For this predictor, you can see how the data vary by sector. So pay for professional information services will exceed that ratio of 1, while leisure jobs pay on average less than 50 cents for every dollar needed. And then to better understand how your conditions compare to other places, whether that's neighbors or other similar-sized communities in different parts of the country, you might get a sense of how to learn from their strategies. You can also look at your data next to others. You can either choose communities yourself that you want to see those peers, or you can get suggested peers, which uses an algorithm that applies a variety of factors to suggest communities that have some commonalities. Here you see how values differ in Palm Beach County and some neighboring counties, mostly hewing pretty closely to that at national average, but again, like most places, falling short of 1. You can also compare counties with cities, and you see here that this is a different predictor now, the opportunities for income. This is the household income at 20th, 50th, and 80th percentile. This graph shows Palm Beach County and 2 neighboring counties, and then 3 cities within Palm Beach County that have large enough populations to be included in this data set. You can obviously see the huge difference between Boca Raton on the top row and Boynton Beach and West Palm Beach at the median level, that yellow dot, but especially at the higher percentiles. And if you're looking at, I will say, if you're looking at counties and cities together, make sure to exercise a little caution when comparing. Sometimes those are calculated differently from each other. So looking at our metric for employment conditions, you'll see that the share of adults between 25 and 54 who are employed shows a bit of a different story between those 3 cities. Boynton Beach has the highest rate and is the only one over the national median. But again, the data will only show you so much if you don't disaggregate to understand inequities. So you have a key measure of financial security, the share of adults with debt in collections. And you can see here that Palm Beach County, its percentage is lower than the national median and than many of its neighbors, and that's a good thing. But it kind of hides the fact that close to 40% of residents in majority neighborhoods of color, this is the bottom row there, 40% of residents in majority neighborhoods of color have debt in collections versus well under 20% for majority white neighborhoods. And that these significant disparities exist in wealth building as measured by the ratio of housing wealth, the share of total home values owned by a racial or ethnic group compared to the share of households in that same group. So in Palm Beach County, while white residents comprise about 60% of the population, They have a far greater share of home wealth, while Black residents, Hispanic residents, and those of other races have a lower share than the population. And I know you'll hear more about the racial wealth gap throughout the day, including from my colleague, Dr. Leslie Ford. I've mostly focused on the rewarding work pillar so far, but this data is available across all of our 24 predictors, those different factors that impact community conditions. So for example, in the education pillar, Palm Beach County is above average in the share of 3- and 4-year-olds enrolled in nursery school or preschool, as are many of the neighboring counties. But yet again, where data is available, there are big disparities by race, with white non-Hispanic children most likely to attend and Hispanic children least likely to. When it comes to the neighborhoods pillar, you can see wide-ranging housing affordability, conditions for people with low, very low, and extremely low incomes. But in no cases are there nearly enough units for these groups, which would require these values to be over 100 on the far right side of the chart. And looking at the 3 cities with data available, that condition is worse in Boca Raton and similar in Boynton Beach and West Palm Beach. And then in access to health services, just to kind of run you through a few other examples, in access to health services, you get a sense that Palm Beach and many of neighboring counties are around national median in terms of the number of primary care providers per person. And in the governance pillar, you see, quite a rare variation on voting rates, with Palm Beach County higher than the national median. So I just wanted to give you a sense of some of this data. I'm going to stop kind of throwing data at you now, but I really do encourage you to play with the dashboard to learn more. A lot of this is very high level and I think would be very familiar and not surprising as you look at some of that variation, given what you know about your community. But there's a lot I didn't show you. There are ways to download graphics, to access the data sets directly if people on your team want to do other analysis. And we have a demo and an FAQ. It provides a lot of support, and we have a few recorded workshops as well. But while the dashboard gives us insight into key trends and community conditions, when it comes to identifying and actually tackling the underlying systems that create those conditions, you obviously need much more than data. We've created some resources that help with that, grounded in lessons we've learned from providing technical assistance to communities. The first I'll share is our predictor pages. These start off with the evidence that I talked about, the literature reviews that say why this factor is connected to economic and social mobility. You can explore all that research and evidence. But they also have a section called Promising Local Policy Interventions. So it compiles work from urban, but many other organizations as well, that show suggested policy strategies based on interventions that have shown promise in communities across the country. So you can see in this slide examples of neonatal health policies, such as home visiting programs and educational supports for parents. And each one of those links to deeper information from resources like the Economic Mobility Catalog, which Jennifer is going to tell you more about in just a moment. As I said before, the mobility metrics can be a helpful starting point, but we know that for any given factor, the things that influence these outcomes are multifaceted. And so pairing the mobility metrics with supplementary local data and qualitative insights for your community can help fill in the gaps and identify the causes underlying the problems and the successes that you see. And one tool to help do that is our Obtaining More Local Data page. It leads you to a pretty extensive catalog of data sources that exist across the internet, vetted by the source and the practice and tagged by those pillars and predictors. It also includes a geography tag, so you can see if it's available at the state level, at the county level, the zip code level, census block, things like that. And along with the tools I've mentioned, we've produced a lot of other things, that including information on the framework and the mobility metrics, series of webinar workshops, all of which are available on our website. The last resource I will call out specifically is our planning guide. It draws on the TA that we did with that original upward mobility cohort, but also with the communities that Dr. Green mentioned and with some other networks we've partnered with like NACO, CF Leads, Feeding America, and the New Growth Innovation Network. We're going to have a new version out in the spring, but it lays out a kind of step-by-step process with strategies for cross-sector coalition building, community engagement, strategy selection, and performance measurement. So with that, you're always welcome to sign up for our email list or find other information on our website. And I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Keith. Hello, good morning. I'm going to put this in here because I have a habit of drifting the microphone. I'm Jennifer Kuiper. I'm with the National Association of Counties, and I'm going to try to catch up a little bit on time because I know we have the opportunity also for some question and answer section. But really, really honored to be here today. The National Association of Counties has been around since the 1930s. We represent the county voice with our federal partners, so the White House, Congress, and federal agencies. And we work really closely with your state association of counties. So here, the Florida Association of Counties that represents county concerns at the state level. I just want to get an idea about who's in the room so I can make sure that I'm meeting your needs. Who here is either an elected or staff official with the county or a county government? One? I know there's more of you. Anyone else? Okay, who are service providers? A couple? Great. Is there anyone that's with an academic or research or university? A couple? And any funders in the room? Oh, wow. Good job, Palm Beach County. So the National Association of Counties works with our county partners. So a lot of the examples that I'm going to provide today are county examples. And I just want to acknowledge that this is the second conference on economic mobility, and we were really excited to help financially support through the Gates Foundation the first. So also an honor to be here and to see the county continuing with and expanding upon what it did over a year ago now when we had a new grandchild coming into the world. So I am, down arrow, thank you, hot tip. So I'm going to focus on the counties, being from NACO, and I'm going to focus on four main topics. One is economic mobility in our community. So we've seen Keith and the previous speakers really talk about what does economic mobility mean. So I'll add a little bit more as you're thinking about how you're developing your programs, lots of service providers in this room, and then also the county role, so how you're partnering with the county. Just to keep in mind what are the authorities and the ways that you can connect with your county, and then a couple of other partner tools in addition to the important tools that Keith provided with the Urban Institute. NACO's also part of the Gates Foundation Community of Practice, and Results for America and Opportunity Insight have two tools in particular that I want to highlight and try to represent. And then NACO has a couple of economic mobility related tools that I want to highlight as well. And I won't go into a lot of detail. These there's links to all of these in the presentation, so you can go. Definitely, as Keith said, you want to explore them, play with them, look at the neighborhoods that you really are passionate about and the communities that you're passionate about as well. I can't quite see this, but I'm going to move through. Okay, so these are a couple of ways as you are developing your strategies that you can think about economic mobility. We've talked about generational, where we were comparing how parents were doing with their kids. You can also think about absolute terms, so the individual over their lifetime, how are they progressing as they make career choices. And you also can think relatively. So how is one community as compared to another community doing in your economic mobility opportunities? And there's some key components that we like to emphasize. One is that this is human-centered, so you want to keep the human in mind in terms of the individual, the family, and the community in which they live and work. You want to think about equity. So how are there differences or disparities as it relates to race, gender, education, personal wealth, geography? I heard all of the presenters earlier today saying where you live really makes a difference, where you were born really makes a difference. So that place-based relevancy factors, and then time. So what does it look like over time? How do you see change in your programming? Counties play a vital role in supporting economic mobility. So these are just 6 ways that counties are making a difference, and that, as I say, if you're a service provider, you're in the community, here's how you can advocate for your communities and connect with Palm Beach County. Policies and resolutions, obviously, this is really where a lot of our elected officials are so vital and important. They make zoning decisions, land use decisions, their own hiring practices overall in the country. 1 in 50 employees are county government employees. So if you make adjustments in your own hiring practices, that can have a huge impact in the community. But industry incentives and disincentives for certain behavior as well oftentimes comes through the county. Looking at funding and revenue generation through bonds, I know Palm Beach had a successful bond initiative to help support affordable housing very recently, and that can be absolutely a game changer for your economic mobility planning. Grants for targeted populations, so small businesses support. We saw during the pandemic how important and vital that was for the survival of small businesses. Counties oftentimes will run those programs. And then contracts and taxes. Programs and services, so either direct service provision for childcare, health, insurance pools. We've seen regional counties pull together insurance programming to allow small business owners and entrepreneurs to access health care, which is a major obstacle for many small business owners from even entering into a small business, and counties have been involved with that. Providing transportation so people can readily and affordably get from their homes to places of work. Workforce and education we heard about earlier today. Infrastructure, so broadband, transportation, all kinds of amenities are oftentimes in the county purview. Research and reporting, so it's great what the service that Urban Institute has provided of consolidating so much data, so important. And you need that local data, that neighborhood-specific data to help you really make decisions and prioritize. And counties are so helpful in doing that, looking at your ecosystems, looking at longitudinal studies, changes over time, and then partnerships. So counties cannot do this without all of you. And the folks that know their communities, know the people that they're serving, and then also can provide those vital services. So in surveying our county leaders about economic mobility, this graph just simply, I'm changing it on my screen, but not on your screen. These are the top 11 priority areas from a county perspective of what programming they want to focus on. Number 1 is education, opportunity, and attainment, but transportation is another vital, and affordable housing. Those are the top 3. This probably looks very familiar to you all from now. This is borrowed again from Opportunity Insight. It's making the case around how things have changed over time. And just for clarity, it's folks that were born in the 1940s had this 90% chance of doing better than their folks. People who are born now in the 80s, that's where you get the coin flip as to whether or not they're doing better. And that's oftentimes how people are defining the American dream, is being able to progress generationally in their opportunities. Again, you probably have seen this one. This is from our folks at Opportunity Insight. This is a national map. The blue areas are where there's greater upward economic opportunity. The red areas are the lowest, so you can see where the state of Florida is. This is a county level map. But what we recognize is that you really need to know it neighborhood by neighborhood. Good to look at county comparisons, but what's my census block look like? And that's really what the Results for America, I'm sorry, not results, we're gonna talk about them later. Opportunity Insights provided with this mapping tool. You can take a look at this for areas of interest. So if you happen to know your census block, you can stick that in there, but if you know your town or your city or your county, it will break it down by that. You can also have options for what metric you wanna look at. So oftentimes we look at household income, but there's other like educational attainment or incarceration rates, other area predictors as what Urban Institute calls it, but also indicators that you can understand community by community, and you can break it down by race. So understanding differences based on race, you can break it down by gender to see if there's disparities that are explained there. And you can look at if the family was born into poverty versus your whole community versus those who are born into higher wage areas. And then you can get this kind of map, which Keith shared with us earlier, where you really are seeing how geographically by census tract you can understand and then prioritize neighborhoods that maybe could benefit for more targeted interventions. What should I point at? There we go. So that's Opportunity Insights, Opportunity Atlas tool. Again, going online and playing with it, looking at your own neighborhood, seeing how that stacks up. You can do comparisons in other parts of the country as well, but really gets at that idea that where you are born makes a huge difference on what your outcomes are statistically and based on the data. And then Results for America is another community of practice partner, RFA. They developed the Economic Mobility Catalog. So once you kind of say, well, we know what we want to change and we know where we want to do it, but we don't have infinite resources to experiment. So we want to start with something that has been tested or tried in other places. And that's where the Opportunity Mobility Catalog comes in. These are all interventions that have been implemented in other places and gone through rigorous evaluation. So it's not the infinite world of ways that you can support economic mobility, but it is areas that have been tested. So they took kind of two different approaches. One is looking at areas of intervention. So if you're K through 12 educators, it has a whole section for that. But if you want to look at strategies where I want to look at kindergarten readiness, then you can also organize yourself in that way. Their resources, are organized in 4 ways: strategy guides, program briefs, case studies. So you can go in and find out where it's been implemented, and there's an implementation guide. So how much did it cost? Who were the key partners? Really getting at the practicality of it. And even better, there's contact information. So you can call someone up and say, how did you guys do this? We're thinking about doing that in Palm Beach. So a very helpful tool from Results for America. I'm then going to very quickly run through some of the tools that NACO provides as well. We had a cohort called the Economic Mobility Leadership Network, which ended about 2 years ago, and former Commissioner, thank you, Mac Bernard, thank you, was part of that and shared a lot of the learning from Palm Beach County with the cohort of folks from all across the country. We had 33 elected officials that participated in that. And hopefully later today we have a video that features Palm Beach County and that cohort that was here. So we have economic levers to help you as a county decide what are ways that I can contribute to economic mobility. I want to kind of flag the county economies under the hood, where we've got individual county profiles that provides information like who are your key industries, what are your workforce trends over time. So it's all specific to the county. That's the link that's highlighted in yellow. We also have a housing solutions matchmaker tool. So if you have high cost, high demand, what are the right housing solutions for that? We developed that with the Aspen Institute and Brookings. ARPA, if you're still kind of thinking about ARPA, what were the ways that those fundings have been used across the country? I will highlight one. We currently have Counties for Economic Mobility engagements, including our rural leaders, recognizing that rural looks very different from urban. Palm Beach County has rural areas, and so some of the strategies that are more effective in those areas will be helpful. But I want to highlight the Counties for Housing Solutions. These are mid-sized to higher population counties that go through a sprint, so a 12-week intensive supported. It's not just training, but you're actually implementing a policy. The policy that we're looking at is leveraging county-owned properties and lands for the purpose of affordable housing. And the second cohort application is opening the end of this year, beginning of next year. We take 6 counties from across the country who receive that support. And some of the outcomes have been repurposing library land, parking lots, schools, all for affordable housing, walking you through how you work with your developers, how you get that funded. So if that's something that is a priority here in Palm Beach County, that's something that you might want to think about organizing and applying for. So I'm just going to also mention we do a lot at NACO with prenatal to 3 and childcare. Have a academy that connects counties with state, which is so important for childcare policy making, and then also counties for career success. So your community college partners, hugely important for workforce development. How do the counties and community colleges, along with your workforce boards, make sure that you're developing learning experiences that are meaningful for job seekers? So I think that's where we're going to stop. I know I'm pointing something in the air. So let me just stop there, and thank you, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to show the video at another time. Thank you.
And now I am going to invite Keith back to the stage and introduce you to Fabiola Brumley. Fabiola is doing some wonderful, wonderful work in investing in our communities, and so she's going to take a minute or so to talk about that work. And then we're going to have a couple of questions to the panelists, and we're going to try to get 1 or 2 questions in from the audience as well. So let's welcome Fabiola to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, James. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to moderate the panel today. And James asked me to talk a little bit about what we do at Bank of America. So first of all, on behalf of my 1,000 or so employees here in Palm Beach County, I want to thank the county, James, you, our commissioners, our administrator, for the work that you all do. You really have done so much to move the needle on economic mobility, and we appreciate that very much. But wanted to just share a little bit about how we think about it. You saw in the Southeast, the Raj Chetty report was pretty brutal on the Southeast, a lot of red. And our headquarters, Charlotte, North Carolina, was smack dab in the middle of that. So that work started very early on with Raj Chetty for us. And we look at it in 3 different ways. And so as a member of industry, we think about our clients. How do our clients fare in economic mobility? We think about our employees and how do they fare, and then our communities. And those 3 things, if we get those 3 things right, the shareholders will be taken care of. And that's the way we think about it. So first with clients, what are the needs? We've created a lot of products as a financial services firm as a result of what we saw in our clients. We went into their wallet, went into their homes to see what are the things that they face day in, day out. We created a safe balance program so employees can enroll if they have a steady paycheck but they have find 1 week they're just off, that there's a way they can protect their balances and actually borrow against their next paycheck. Another, America's home ownership grants, I mean, those grants go a long way. You may think, $17,500 is not a lot of money. It's a lot of money for some folks, especially first-time home buyers who really need that little extra push in order to, not a loan, but a grant that will help them buy their first home and money towards closing costs. And we continue to expand on that in terms of we've been piloting, 100% home home lending, home ownership lending across the country. We hope to be able to expand that elsewhere. So our clients and then our employees have to reflect the community we serve. And here in Palm Beach County and across our company, we look like the community we serve. And that way we have a voice that's from the community right here in our employee base. So we engage them, you may have heard, minimum wage. We committed to $25 an hour minimum wage by 2025. We're on track. We're over 24 now, and we'll be at 25 next year. And we have a matching program for our employees. So wherever they want to volunteer, we give them credit towards those volunteer hours by giving grants that they get to direct. We invest in our people of color because, they don't have moms and dads at home that are, like in that 1940 category. So we need to help them know how to develop professionally. So that's a very active program, and if you talk to some of our employees, we've been able to promote within over and over again because they're getting that mentorship within our company. And then last, our communities, and I think, since 2019, we've invested $8.1 million into economic mobility, and thanks to the partnerships, we don't do it directly. Sometimes people say, well, what are you doing to make that happen? We're a financial services firm. So just like our other peer industry group, we're really good at financial advice, risk management, but we don't know how to do what you all do every day. But we believe in paying it forward and paying back, and that's why we have a matching gifts program. When our employees give, we match those gifts because that's where their heart is, and we encourage that in volunteerism in every way. And we just finished a community needs assessment here. Some of our top nonprofits were around the table advising us what is the need for this county for 2025. And for those of you who don't know Stephanie Del Tondo, she's sitting here with me, but she goes out and visits all of those nonprofits to figure out, who's being a great steward of those dollars that we give, and is there a return in this community on that investment? And so we thank those partnerships. We thank you, so many in the room today. We thank you for what you do every day, and we believe that it's the public sector, industry, the nonprofit community, it's everybody, all hands on deck that make this county great. So our economic development partners are everybody's all hands on deck, and we thank you for that. So that's a little bit about us, but once again, I want to thank the county for putting this on. It's a phenomenal summit, and now we've got some questions for our panelists, so I'll go right into that. Keith and Jennifer, you did a great job in presenting today, so a lot of great data, lots of phones out taking pictures. So I want to start with you, Keith, so some questions, if you don't mind. You talked about 170 factors going into, a lot of factors going into how counties make these decisions, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the Urban Institute's framework and what's the one factor you would say for this county? I don't know which counties that you had in your case studies look more like Palm Beach County, but maybe talk a little bit about the factors that matter most.
Thank you. I'm going to cheat a little on this. I always do because there's, that framework has 24 predictors. We got it down to that. We can debate how concise they are, but I think the exciting for the folks in this room, but also the challenging thing about upward mobility is that it's never just one issue, right? And I think what we're always excited about is drawing those connections that help people work together differently. And I think Palm Beach County, from everything I've learned, is ahead of many places in having coalitions that focus on the intersection of education and housing and workforce. You cannot solve one of these problems without solving a lot of them. I will say I came, before I was at the Urban Institute, I was at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, so I think housing is something that I always think of as being really critical to upward mobility. It's also something that, looking back over those decades, right, we know that this is a place where inequitable systems have really created different outcomes, right? You know, I think everybody's familiar with redlining and things that made it hard for people of color to even have access to living in certain neighborhoods and decades ago, but all sorts of things that continue, whether it's, you know, housing discrimination in the form of who gets selected for rental opportunities, or more recently, you know, new research about basically, you know, home appraisals and how there's racial differences in the same home based on the characteristics and demographics of the people who own it. So, you know, housing affordability, stability, I think these are really central to everything else. But of course, the research, like from Opportunity Insights, shows that, you know, education is probably the most direct predictive factor of long-term upward mobility. But just really encouraging, like, thinking about the way these fit together and also thinking about those power and autonomy and belonging elements.
That's great. Thank you so much. Education, we've got it. Jennifer, you mentioned the NACO's Economic Mobility Leadership Network, and our Senator Mac Bernard now was part of that, and that ended 2 years ago. I'm just wondering, you know, have there been any other successful committees or leadership networks that have, you know, taken place of that from 2 years ago?
Yeah, we're very fortunate to continue working with the Gates Foundation that provided that initial funding. We were funded in 2019, and then something happened in 2020, as some of you might remember. But what we found is the ability for those commissioners to stay connected through the pandemic and the immediacy of needs across the income groups meant that was a really effective way for information sharing and learning from each other. So in the beginning of this year, the Gates Foundation continued support in what is now called Counties for Economic Mobility. It has expanded beyond our elected officials to also recognize how important our county staff are in the implementation component of that. So we're currently working with 10 counties from across the country in our rural sector, recognizing that some of this data doesn't work at the rural level. Even if you've got a largely urbanized county, you won't have disaggregated data in some of the more sparsely populated areas. So that is an effort for NACO to contribute to the national conversation of what do we need to pay attention to when it comes to lower population, more rural areas. So that's our Rural Leaders for Economic Mobility. And then again, I just want to do a pitch for our Counties for Housing Solutions. We heard when we were, when at the time Commissioner Mac Bernard, and thank you, Commissioner, for reminding me the correct name. When we visited Palm Beach County, we brought all of those commissioners here from across the county, and there was tremendous amount of learning that happened here. The Spady Cultural Museum, which many of you probably know, such a gem. We had a commissioner from El Paso, Texas, that took that idea of celebrating, honoring, and commemorating history of African Americans here in the county to his community of mostly Spanish-speaking neighborhoods along the Rio Grande in particular, after looking at the wetlands, and taking that learning and saying, how can we do what Palm Beach County did? So that national conversation is so important, especially right now where there's there's a narrative that exists in the national level around government and the value of government and government employees. And this is something that I want to acknowledge from NACO's perspective, is standing up for our local governments, how vital they are, how important they are to actually seeing service delivery targeted to where we need them, and to not just throw out, because this is government delivery, that there's something less desirable about it. So we recognize the importance of partnerships with our non-governmental actors, but to the extent that we continue to tell the stories of how important counties and Palm Beach County is having, not just locally, but nationally, I think that's really important, and one of our main communications around what NACO's doing right now with local government.
Well, as you can see, NACO and the Urban Institute have done a phenomenal job, and lots of resources available. So I'm going to jump to, do we have time for audience question?
Yes, so we are going to take some questions from the audience. If you have a question, you can just make your way up to the mic. Maybe we'll have time for one or two, and then we'll need to transition to the next session. So if you are a panelist or speaker for the workshop sessions, feel free to go ahead and transition over. If you have questions, just please come to the microphone, and then we'll
People are getting up to transition, but I know someone's coming to the mic.
I'm not afraid to get things started. I actually have two questions. When you talked about the county land usage, you can't hear. I don't think it's not. So when you talked about the county land usage for affordable housing, do you also consider it for home ownership, for small business development, for agriculture?
I'm really bad with technology. So that, what you just said, the main point is counties have so much authority over land use decisions. And so it is completely locally determined. And that's why what we support is data-informed decision-making. So one of the things we heard in terms of Palm Beach County when we were visiting is how it's really been successful in attracting jobs. Like, there are a lot of jobs here in Palm Beach County, but one of the obstacles to bringing in new business is housing and affordable housing. So whether that's home ownership or rental properties. And so that has become a regional priority for Palm Beach County. There may be other areas, and Palm Beach County also has large agriculture industry. So there's been measures that the county has taken to preserve agricultural use. Right now, NACO is seeing, and this is not necessarily here, but we're seeing a lot of debate around land use in agricultural lands when it comes to clean energy, and especially solar farms and wind farms. So those conversations are really important to happen at the local level. Your county has to be at the table as you're making those kind of decisions.
I appreciate that. Can I ask one more question? And Keith, I just want to say I appreciate you bringing up redlining and that historical aspect, because it's so important, and that leads to my question for you. When you're talking about the grants that you offer, do you consider past discrimination practices, specifically from Bank of America and other financial institutions, to make sure that those grants are equitable?
It's a great question. I think that's something we've been working on for decades to make that right. I think, what you're describing for our company goes back, 50, 60 years, and we are far more advanced today in how we evaluate and provide, credit to potential homeowners. In addition to that, and I know several in the room, because you asked about small business, we were the leaders, along with my other fellow bankers in the audience, in bringing a community development financial institution to the county. The county was very concerned about lending and in the regulatory environment all of us in banks operate in. And so we needed a CDFI and helped stand up Pathway Capital Funding, because I remember meeting with County Administrator Virginia Baker. We said, all right, we can go to Miami or we can go to Orlando and have businesses access capital that way. And she said, no, we want one here in Palm Beach County. And so we worked worked in industry together to make that happen with the Economic Council and all of my, again, fellow bankers in the room to make sure we stood that up. And we stood that up during the pandemic. And so it was, again, access to capital is a priority and has been, so it cuts across home ownership, small business access to capital, and beyond. Great question, thank you.
We'll take one more question from Daniel, and then I'm going to invite Dr. Kane up to say a few words along with Dr. Gerlach, and then we're going to transition.
You mentioned housing, and obviously, particularly here in Palm Beach County, a huge issue. I think ordinary people really struggle on an average to just pay rent. It's crazy. So I was just kind of wondering, what, from your perspectives, like kind of what, for a county like ours, which I think has some unique dynamics, what do you see as the root causes of that? And I think you mentioned some of the ways that at the county level are already being worked on, but kind of what do you see are the main contributors to that, and how we maybe get out of this for people to just afford their house?
I can't answer that question, so I'm like looking to my other folks in terms of root causes, but you're asking the right question, because oftentimes when you're developing a response, you need to understand where that comes from. What we've seen in current conditions is that there's an inflow of population that you're having here, and so trying to identify the housing across the housing spectrum and what different incomes are available is going to be part of that solution. But the root causes, you've been here for 20-something years, so you probably have a good answer to that too.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly, I mean, I do think population inflow is a part of it. I'm from Michigan. I think there are more Michiganders in Florida than as in almost anywhere else. So many of these things, there are really good aspects to a strong economy that draw a lot of people to this area. But then, housing development, whether it's dating back, to the Great Recession, which put a big slowdown on the growth of new housing, whether it's, the cost of building new homes or regulatory stuff. There's just so many factors that I think are creating a tremendous lag between demand and the increasing supply.
It's a great question. Anytime somebody asks a great question, it usually means there's a lot of complexity. The one thing that I will say, our Economic Council made up of industry, we went with our government leaders. We had more than half our commissioners there. Of course, our county administrator and her staff to Dallas, and we were comparing Palm Beach County to Dallas. The median household costs in Dallas are half what they are here, even though the income levels are very comparable. So you ask a really great question. They don't have an ocean or the Everglades or any of the mobility issues that we have here, so we're landlocked. They can keep going out and further. Okay, so you know that, yeah, you know that. His brother lives in Dallas, for those who didn't hear it. So you're asking a great question. I think it's something that all of us in the room are trying to address, and we're working through that. And I would say the conversation is alive and well, and you don't have any bifurcation of what the ultimate, need, goal, objective, and so on is between government and the private sector. Our nonprofit community, we've got United Way CEO here, the Alice community, and the impact that has had on this community is very real, and I'm really proud of our nonprofits who are just, slugging it out every day, helping to serve those. But I think the answer is going to be in this room. So hopefully by the end of the day, we'll get a little closer to what that looks like.
Thank you.
Let's give our moderator and our panelists